Well, here we are, a little walk through the Give Energy all-in-one battery system. This is the battery. You can see the size of it. It's actually 13.5 kilowatts. At the top we have the inverter, and then underneath are 4 battery packs which you can pull in or out. Well, not me, because they're quite secured inside and I have no need to get into them, but it does mean that it was lighter for them to be able to fit it up against the wall. Then the brains of the system is this box here. This is the gateway unit, and it's the one that enables me to have all my statistics that I'd like to look at, but more importantly it connects between the grid and the battery and the house, meaning that if there's a power cut this can carry on using the battery. During the day it effectively isolates the mains so that I'm using the battery unless I need to use too much, in which case it will pull it in from the mains. So this really is the clever box, and up here you can see it's got the battery and the load and the utility, so I know what's going where as we go around. And over here of course we have a good old meter box away with all the plants. So how does it all work? This is connected into the meter box. There's no cable shown because I actually put it into the wall, so it comes out from the back of this box and goes through. I'll show you where it comes in a moment. And then from here we have a cable that comes out and along up through this emergency switch and then into the battery. At the side here there is an on-off switch, but there seems little point in switching the battery on and off because I either need it to charge or to discharge. I don't want it to just sit there not doing anything. It has a little aerial here so that it will connect to the Wi-Fi, so I can look at various bits and pieces. So that is how it fits, and you can see just how relatively neatly it's all sitting on the wall. I am thinking of actually boxing it in with a little cover somehow to make it a bit more waterproof. But now I'll take you deeper inside the meter box. Right, this is the inside of the meter box, and you can see there's some cables coming out here. There's actually 2 pairs, 2 browns and 2 blues, for the lives and the neutrals, and then down here we've got the earth cable coming out as well. So from the mains input we take 2 cables which then go up through the wall into the gateway unit, and then 2 cables come out of the gateway unit and come round through here and into these Henley blocks, which then go off to the distribution centre, the consumer unit, through these grey cables. And just to be awkward, I've got another pair of cables that come down into the battery, into the car charger, but obviously these are the ones that feed the house. And inside here it's all looking very neat. This, as it says, comes from the grid, so the power comes in through this set of breakers. It then comes through into the load which goes off to the house. Now inside here it can decide whether to have the grid going through to the load or the all-in-one battery coming through into the load. Everything is tripped. This input here would be if you had solar power. If you do have solar, it will connect into here and it will either feed the load and or feed the battery. So the battery obviously can't feed the solar, but the battery can feed the house. The solar can feed the 2. And there is even a space here for a set of trips for the EV charger. Obviously my charger is already connected up over there, so I haven't got anything connected in here, so it's been blanked off. But this particular one is very important, because should something go wrong with the actual gateway unit or the battery itself and you lose power totally, if you switch this on, and obviously you need to take the cover off first to get in there, it will just go straight from the grid, bypass everything in here and go straight back into the house. So you won't lose your mains power if the gateway unit or the battery fail in any way, which obviously is pretty useful. Now there's not a lot here to see, but this is just the on-off switch, isolation switch, which is outside the house, so if anything goes wrong you can come out and just turn this off, or a passerby can turn it off or whatever. And as I said earlier on, down here we've got the on-off switch for the actual battery itself, which obviously are on. This doesn't open up, you'd need to get the screws to do that, which I obviously have no intention of doing. So you can see there's just the one cable that comes down from the gateway unit, and then the one that goes into the battery itself. This is the Give Energy portal, which goes straight to the cloud. There is an app, but it's not, I don't find it that much any advantage to you. This is the Give Energy portal coming from the cloud. There is an app, but I can't say I'm a great fan of it. It is useful if you're out and about, but not really for doing too much. It has this lovely little picture that shows you exactly what's going on. Here we have the battery with the gateway unit at the top and the meter box. And as you can see at the moment, it is charging through, the battery is going, get out of the way. The battery is feeding into the gateway unit, which is then going into the house, and it is also exporting a little bit. It tells us up here it's exporting 3 watts. That's really a bit of leakage as much as anything. And over here we are using 233 watts in the house at the moment, so the battery is discharging. Now that's all jolly fun, but it isn't, it's very picturesque, but it doesn't really go into too much detail. Over here we have a little chart for today, and the red is the grid powering the house and the blue is the battery powering the house. And over here, as you can see, we've got a little pie chart which shows that most of today has been with the grid, but it's not that big a difference. It's 46% to 53 or 54 really. So that's how it's looking at the moment. It will also display solar, but as we said before, I don't have solar, so it won't show it. So this is quite an interesting one you can change around to have a look at. The battery being charged, that was overnight between midnight and about 3:30. Oops. We can look at the battery out, which not surprisingly will be over here, which is where we are powering the house. Now my rate changes at 7 o'clock in the morning, so over here it was feeding a little bit in, but it was actually on charge, and then from 7 o'clock we see that it actually starts powering the house when the heating kicks in and so on, right up to now. And as you can see, there's been a little bit that's gone back from the battery to the grid, 80 watts, which if I ever get an export tariff worked out, obviously they will pay me for, but it's not really one way or the other. And we also have the grid in and the grid out, so they're quite interesting, and you can go back through different days. So this was yesterday, and you can see interestingly here, just before 12 o'clock, there's a little bit of grid that was used as well. I'm not entirely sure why that happened. I was at Oxford at the time, so I wasn't here to know what Glims was doing, but presumably she would have been switching something on which drew a lot of current which the battery felt it couldn't cope with, so the gateway unit brought a little bit in from the grid. But apart from that, it's been the battery all day, which is nice, because obviously it means I'm getting it cheaper. And then over here we have all sorts of graphs that we can look at. The blue here is where the battery was charging this morning. The red is the input from the grid. And the green above it here is the load that the house was drawing. So along here you can see there's a little bit of grid being used between midnight and about 4 o'clock, not surprisingly, because the fridge, the freezer and things like that are still drawing a little bit of power, but most of it is not load on the house. Most of the grid input is coming in to charge up the battery. At 4 o'clock the battery was full, and at 4 o'clock the underfloor heating kicks in to start warming the rooms up, because it does take a while. So you'll see here that the red and the green mirror each other, because that's where it was going. And then once you get to 7 o'clock, we see where I come down, it suddenly spikes. That's where I was starting to cook the breakfast. And then at 7 o'clock it changes. There is suddenly no more call on the grid, but obviously there is a load on the house, so that's been met by the battery. And they've got various peaks of different things have come on and gone off throughout the day. And after lunchtime it's actually been very quiet. We have used hardly anything, it's just trickling along. The line that you can see is the percentage. So obviously when we started at midnight there was not much left in the battery from the previous day, so consequently the percentage was low, and as it charged you can see it gets higher and then up to 100%. Obviously there's nothing coming out of the battery really at this point until 7 o'clock, when it starts charging, starts being used in the house. And at that point there wasn't a lot going on until we were actually up and about and doing things and using a bit more heating and so on. So obviously the percentage starts to fall, and obviously you can see it falling quite happily all the way down. And yet here, where we're hardly using any, it's just coming down in very small steps. And it looks to me as if we currently got about half of the battery left to get through this afternoon and this evening, which is nice. There are other bits you can add in and take out from this, so you can have the battery temperature showing, which is quite nice. Get off. Come on. Thank you. And likewise, at midnight it was actually coldest because it was cold. It was rather a chilly night, but as it's charging up it's getting warmer until it reaches its peak here of about 16 degrees, and then it's no longer being charged and it starts to dip down again, and then the sun comes up, and where the battery stands is not actually in the sun until a bit later in the day, but you can see suddenly it starts to go around. The air gets warmer, the sun starts to flow on it today, and the temperature has gone up. And then as the sun has then passed by, it's now behind Simon's house, it's starting to cool off, and we are down to approximately 12 degrees now. So it's quite happy working down to minus 10, it says, I think it was, for the discharge. So that's quite reasonable. So that's nice looking. I do look at that sometimes just to have a look, see what it's doing. You can see the voltage of the battery, the inverter and powers, and the grid import export. Obviously we don't have much export, so we don't see much. But down here it shows you what they all are, and you can actually switch them on and off from here as well. So there's no point having it solar on, I haven't got it. The battery percentage I'll take off again, and if you hover over them they actually highlight more, so you can see there's the battery charging, there's the grid input, grid export, just a straight line, and the load on the house. So you can turn them all off if you want to. And obviously likewise you can go back to previous days. This was yesterday, as I say, it was a cold night, so you can see how it's really plummeted. That's the percentage. I haven't got the temperature showing now. What's that? There's the temperature. It's the percentage I haven't got shown. Yeah, so that's the temperature coming down. But once again you see the same central curve. It's cold, it warms up as it charges up to its peak, then the charging stops, it cools down again, then the sun gets round, the air gets warmer, and it goes down until it's midnight and we start all over again. So that's the sort of things we can look at easily. There's a quick overview you can see straight away. You can also get into the inverter and the battery itself. So this is the battery. It tells you all about it, the software and so on. The notifications coming in about it. The system. You can see I have it on a timed charge. If we look at that, it shows you that I've got it coming in from midnight until 7 o'clock. And I want it to charge to 100% by 7 o'clock. So it charges by 4 o'clock, but it then makes sure it's still at 100% by the time it's 7 o'clock. So it'll be trickling in as it's trickling out. System data. There's various bits and bobs you can look at, as you can see. There was another one I wanted to show you. Oh yes, here it is. This shows you how much you can keep in reserve. At the moment I'm not keeping any in reserve, just 4% in reserve. But I will obviously up that, because what's in the reserve is the minimum you would have if there was a power cut at the worst possible time before you charge the battery. And you can say how quickly you want the battery to charge or to discharge. I've got it charging at 2.5 kilowatts. The reason for that is I could have it going up to 6 kilowatts, but I want it to take a reasonable amount of time because it warms the battery up as it does it. And also at midnight, if I'm charging the car, that's when that starts off. So I might actually change the time that I start from midnight to 1 o'clock. I'll see how it all handles when I do charge the car next. The discharge I've got coming in at 6 kilowatts. So I can draw from the battery at 6 kilowatts and I will fill it up at 2.5 kilowatts. But obviously these all want fiddling around with as we learn how to do it. You can also have a timed export. So if you've got an export tariff, you could turn around and say, well, I don't want any more of that power, I'll dump that out to the grid and I'll have the money, thank you. Don't want to reset. The eco is basically, if you've got solar, it will charge when you've got excess solar over the amount of solar the amount of power the house needs. It will charge the battery, so it tries to keep the battery topped up from all your excess or from the grid, whichever you need to do. And we can also look at the battery. Sorry, that was the battery. We can look at the inverter, or the gateway box rather, and we can see from there, same sort of thing, general things, the software versions it's on, notifications, there aren't any because it's new. Settings, there aren't any for that, it's all set automatically. System data, battery data is basically, those are the boxes inside the battery, and so there are 4 of them. There's 3, 5, that's interesting. Oh, at different times, at the times, different batteries and how much they're getting up to and stuff. Not really investigated this lot too much, as you can tell. So, go between the gateway, the 2 different boxes as there are. So that's that. And then we can look at the tariff. So the tariffs are set up, as you can see, 9.5 pence during the night and 33 pence during the day. Now this is today, so it's not actually, doesn't keep it that up to date. So it just shows up until this, where we about 7 o'clock where it changed over. So if we look at yesterday's, I'll make it bigger so we can see it better. If we look at yesterday's, there we are. This is the import, so this is the mains coming in, and I've stopped using it at 7 o'clock. and it reckons that I have used £1.58 worth of electricity yesterday, because the rest was on the battery. So this large lump here is where it was charging, and then obviously the floor came in at this point after it had charged. Then you can look at each individual bit of data as well over here, so it gives you the time and how much is going on. So obviously this is charging the battery. It also shows you the rate, 9.5 pence. Then we come down here to 36 pence, and suddenly I'm not importing anything, which is what I like, just a little bit there. And so it was a blip I showed you earlier on. So, but they're minuscule amounts that are coming and going from into the grid. And you can actually highlight sections of it on any of the graphs, and it will expand that so you can look at that in detail. And that's about it really for this, I think. Well, you can look at the weather if you want. It's jolly exciting, isn't it? As if you haven't got enough apps to look at weather with. Right, so I think I'll call that a day. That's how it all hangs together.